Okay, I'll just share my screen and bring up the slides. Can everyone see that?
Yep.
Yep, sure can.
Wonderful. Thanks, everyone. Welcome back to our fortnightly Zoom calls of the AU eRequesting Technical Design Group. We had a face-to-face a couple of weeks ago, which was a change of pace and was really lovely to meet a whole bunch of you in person that I'd only really seen on video conference. We've got a bit of a packed agenda today. So we'll be kicking off with our usual business that we always do, approval of minutes, looking at actions of the previous meetings. And then we'll go through and do some updates. We've got some new co-chairs from people who put their hand up to come and be a co-chair for this group in the face-to-face. And I also want to give an update around the fact that we now have a draft fire AG and the GitHub repository has now been in place, which also allows us the JIRA content. I'll look through that really briefly. We'll leave going through that in more detail to a future meeting, but I'll just provide some links, give some context for it. And then we want to do a bit of the report back from the face-to-face, including outcomes from the use case prioritization session, where we've sort of voted on a starter set of the R1 use cases, which also raised we were missing one in pathology, and that was held over to this meeting to vote on that. So that's up for discussion today. And also some comments on outcomes from the day. And then we're going to go through the foundational architecture concepts. Sorry, I just need to get someone on mute.
You on mute.
Great. Okay, excellent. We fixed that. And then Kylin is here and Heather's on the line, which is fantastic. And we're going to get some of the context and information around the eRequesting data for interoperability, where that's at, how we will be able to see, I guess, the progress of that and some of the overlap and also the different division of responsibilities between the clinical design group and the technical design group. And lastly, we'll talk about what we're doing next and a bit on the connectathon. So packed agenda. So usual business up first. We have 2 sets of meeting minutes to approve. Our last conference call, which was on the 1st of February, where the Department of Health and Aged Care walked through their eRequesting long-term hypothesis target state. And I will note here that we've updated the slides that are on those meeting minutes. There's one slight difference between what was presented to the group and what's attached, and that's it now actually has the email to provide feedback on that. And the other set of minutes, which was sent out for review, I think on Monday this week, are the face-to-face minutes that we've gone through, and we've included all the mentee content and links out to the workshop outcomes. So I need to ask, does anyone need more time to go through that to provide feedback, or are we happy to move forwards and approve those 2 minutes? I'm not here. Sorry?
Happy to move forward if you like.
Thank you. So are you happy to then motion, Keith?
Yes. Yeah, I'll motion.
Fantastic. Do we have a second?
I'll second, Daniel.
Thanks, Angus. So I'll launch our poll. Just launch. Everyone should be able to see that now. For those of you who are new and are just joining us, we go through and we vote on approval of the previous minutes. If you haven't reviewed those minutes, you maybe haven't joined us at that stage, then please abstain. We do want everyone on the line to vote where they're able to. So we're almost there, maybe just a couple more people. Perfect. Okay, I'll end that poll now. And I'll share those results. And the motion has passed. And I'll stop sharing. So we've approved our minutes. And I'll give an update on the actions from previous meetings. So there was no action on the 1st of February, but we did take an action on the 14th of February, which was to introduce that pathology use case, the equivalent of the D01 request for diagnostic imaging generic data requirements. And that's been added so that we can consider its inclusion today. So that's done. So what we'll move to now is updates. And I'm really happy to announce we've got 2 new co-chairs. We've got Christopher Skeen and Stuart Hanson. Christopher, if you're on the line, do you want to pop off mute and give an introduction? Christopher's not here. Stuart, if you're on the line, do you want to do the same?
I sure am, Danielle. Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Stuart. I'm from the Royal Australian and New Zealand College of Radiologists. I work in the digital health space over here. So we have a few projects around standardizing terminology for radiology and the work that will feed into FHIR on that eventually. We also do some work in the CDS space and other weird and wonderful digital health projects that we have through the college and through the industry as well. So happy to be here and get involved and learn a bit more. Thanks,
Stuart. We'll get Chris to give an introduction the next time he's available to this group, so you all know, what he looks like and can then go corner him if you've got questions. And I'm just going to go through now our updates that we have a skeleton, a draft AU eRequesting FHIR implementation guide. I'm going to click on that link there and show you what's in there. Now, what we end up putting in our continuous integration build, and that is our current working draft, is the current consensus position. So until we essentially agreed on something, we didn't have content to put in. So we've got this draft. I'm not going to go through it in great detail. It's there. The links are there. And these slides I'm walking through, by the way, are already attached to the Confluence page, so you can go download and find those. And we now have that section on use cases, which is in here. So there are no profiles, there's no terminology, there's no extensions, because we're not there yet. But as we work through that, those will be added into this FHIR implementation guide. And they're going to get added through our GitHub repository. This is the open source mechanism we use. This is available, and it has a little set of README on how to contribute to this, what to do if you find an issue or want to otherwise raise something or get in contact. And for those of you who are interested in directly contributing to the FHIR implementation IG, you will be able to, like an open source repository, fork and submit pull requests to actually directly contribute the changes we agree in this technical design group. So I'm just going to stop that at that point because I don't want to spend too much time on that today. It's just to let you know it's here. And I also want to raise that we now have the JIRA project available for AU eRequesting. So every specification, AU Core, AU Base, Provider Directory, and all the international ones have their own space in JIRA. We've now set that up for eRequesting, and that's how we'll be receiving specification feedback when that becomes relevant. I've got the 2 filters here for what to see. And I also want to call out that we've added to the eRequesting Confluence page a little widget on the right. So that will show you any open requests that have popped up here. At the moment, there are none, of course, which makes sense. There's, we're still building this out, and it's just got the test issue. But what that might end up looking like, if I show you where AU Core is at, which is about 6 months ahead of where we are in this group, is it's showing the list of open change requests on the AU Core specification. So you'll be able to see that when you're logged into the Confluence page on eRequesting. So those are the updates. I think I'm going to skip past these slides in the interest for time, because we do have a lot to talk about today, but I'll come back to them maybe next week to put a little bit of context around how we're building out the implementation guide and what does it mean that we're building consensus through this group, and that process there from identifying a requirement into doing some pre-work and review, into voting through this technical design group, and then putting it into the implementation guide, and then continuing to refine that through piloting a connectathon up to ballots. But I'll leave that as a really high level for now, and we'll come back to that, I think, in a future meeting. So let's get on to the 14th of February report back. And this, I think, is one of the significant outcomes from the day is we have accepted the following 12 use cases as the starting set for AU eRequesting in R1. These use cases are the ones that have been provided for feedback and review from this group for a number of weeks now. And I might actually just read them out just so we're clear that these are the 12. So D01, the requests for diagnostic imaging that are the generic data requirements. And then we've got D02 through to D04 being a request for diagnostic examination, but going through it's assigned, unassigned, reassigned, those different kinds of flavors. And in pathology, you might note we have 3 instead of 4. We were missing the generic data requirements. We have the assigned, unassigned, and reassigned. And we also voted to include the Rule 3 INR test. And these that are the general use cases, the tracking and fulfillment of a service request, cancelling a request from the requester, who's cancelling that, cancelling a request from the provider side, and specification of results to be copied to another clinician. So that's our starter set that we agreed on. I'll open that up at this point for any comments or questions on that.
I'll start on one, Danielle. So are we, given that we're missing the generic data requirements for pathology, but we've got it for radiology, are we going to try and push to get that added?
Yes, I'd like to. That's the next slide. That was one of our actions there, is I think that's the next step for this group in this meeting to say, let's have that alignment. Yeah.
Thanks.
Keith?
What was the rationale of the use of the term examination versus imaging?
Is there someone on the call who can speak to that?
I believe at the time it was just the we had imaging originally, and then there was feedback around changing to examination, and then I know that on the page there's more feedback to change it back to change it to something else. It's which is all good. Is there if there's a general preference for how that should be described, then this is what we're looking for in the feedback.
So I don't need to read anything into that. They're synonymous.
Correct.
Okay, no worries. Thanks.
There will be, we're about to, in this meeting as well, highlight where we're going to go through refinement of the wording of this particular content. And those slides are coming up pretty shortly, I think, to highlight the fact that this is still an ongoing refinement, and we need this technical design group and the people who are here to refine the wording. Mitesh.
Hi, G07 specification of results to be copied to another clinician. What does that include?
I can talk about if you want to now.
Thanks, Angus.
So I see this at a high level just being copies too. So we tend to, when we get requests, especially in pathology, and I believe it's the same in radiology, the doctor will often list that he wants a copy of the reports to be sent to some other GP or person. So it's just a use case to cover that off, that we support that electronically, the transition of that data of where would you like copies to be sent.
Thank you.
Thanks. Rob?
Yeah, thanks. Look, just I wasn't there. I was at the clinical one the day before, but I'm just your P09 Rule 3 INR test. Is that just for INRs, or is it going to be for other pathology tests that are also Rule 3 exempt? So the Rule 3 exemption is a concept rather than for one specific type of test. And I wonder whether you should be calling it INR or whether you should be calling it Rule 3 exemption.
Yeah, I agree, Rob. It was just the use case that was put up was INR, but I think our logical conclusion here is that we're covering Rule 3 exemptions. It just happened that the NICE use case spoke about INRs, and that's why the word INRs got into the rule there. But as Daniel said, we need to all wordsmith the words of these use cases. I think the intent is Rule 3 exemption.
Okay, that's good. Fine.
Yes, I can confirm that. As you would see with P02, it's not our intent to only be able to support requests for liver function tests, for example. So what we ended up seeing was some specific examples, I guess, were proposed on the day to illustrate what an instance of that would be. But yes, it is Rule 3 exemption.
Okay, thanks.
Andy?
I was just going to make a comment about G03 cancelling from a provider. We probably just need to be careful to distinguish cancellation from rejection from failure to deliver. Having a provider arbitrarily cancel the request itself is probably not what we actually want.
Okay, we might take an action then to seek clarification on that point specifically on this use case. And Chris, are you happy to accept that action?
Yeah, I agree. I think that
Yep.
one needs to be thought through. It is the requester who's requested it. So what's the implications of the provider cancelling it? That's tricky.
Yes, and there have been some examples of situations that sort of back up the use case, but definitely we can get in there and the idea is to make it more specific to make sure we're covering accurate things that actually happen.
Andy, I see your hand is up. Do you have further comments?
No, my hand is going down.
Okay. Sanjeev?
Yeah, a couple of questions. First one's about G07, copy to another clinician, setup of a provider directory. I mean, is there any suggested approach, or will it be discussed from a vendor's perspective how this will be set up, considering we don't have an NPD?
I think we do, but yes, sorry, keep going.
I'm sorry, and the second one was more around the standardization of test codes. Will that be covered as part of this?
Yes, I think what you're raising is some of our next steps around how do we approach and address these use cases, and I think that we'll take that through when we look at how do we satisfy these. Yes. Heath?
Is that all your questions, Sanjeev?
Yep.
So I guess I know there's fulfillment or tracking of fulfillment requests, but in the context of the cancel by a provider, is there the concept of declining? Is that related to GA3 or is it actually just part of GA1?
Yeah, I think it's kind of what Andy said, isn't it, Heath? There's two concepts here that we kind of know of from our experience, that there's rejecting the order at the front door when it first arrives. And then there is, I've accepted the order, I'm doing the work, and then I fail at the end to produce for whatever reason. I broke the tube or something. So I don't think we're clear here at all. I think it's loosely so I don't think we're clear. We don't know if we're talking about rejecting the request to do it or whether we're failing to fulfill the requirement that we accepted. You know.
Cancelling is a whole nother concept, and that's maybe right. Yeah, okay, so we are confused a little bit
I'd say
around what
so.
that actually means. All right, cool. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Eve. David?
Just going to the previous question about provider directory, we have a great opportunity here, and I'll speak on behalf of the Digital Health Agency. We have a great opportunity here to collect requirements that the agency can start responding to in their design of the provider directory.
Yeah,
Thanks,
I'd add to that. I'd add to that. At the top it says requesting R1. So you know, I think we need to get into conversations, but whether we're going to use a provider directory to look up the copy to doctors' details is probably beyond R1. But we need to support what is practice today in both electronic auditing and papering auditing at a minimal scale, and then look to the future for provider directory and better ways to do it.
Thanks, Angus. So I'll move us
Yes.
on to this point then, where we were looking for the matching use case to be included in R1 of request for pathology test generic data requirements. And so that's on the table for this meeting for us to vote to include this in the R1 starter set of use cases. And I won't go into too much more detail on this. This is a matching set to D01. These have been out for and available for review. So I'll open this up for any questions or comments before we move to vote. Okay. Is someone happy to motion for inclusion of this in the R1 set?
I'll motion for it to be included, Daniel.
Thanks, Angus.
And
Would
I'll
someone like
second
to second that? Oh, thanks. Keith, was it?
Jane.
Jane? Okay. So I'll now post that poll. Okay, you should see the poll there for vote for inclusion of P10 in our R1 use cases. Okay, that's coming in. We've had about 70% of people vote. Just waiting for the other few. Okay, that's pretty close. Just a couple more people. Okay, I can end that poll there, and I will share those results. And the motion has passed overwhelmingly, with one negative vote. Okay, I'll stop sharing. And I'll hand over at this point to Chris to go through this. Please indicate when you want me to move a slide.
Yep, thanks, Danielle. So yeah, as a going through what we did during the workshop, like I said, the use cases that we voted on at the time, so we got the 12 use cases. The general consensus was that the headings for them were happily accepted. So it's in terms of the intent for each one. Sorry, can you go to the best press forward, Danielle? However, there's been lots of encouragement to change the description. So the wording of it is meant to bring out a specific sort of scenario in which that sort of backs up the intent for the use case. So like for D02, it's an assign request. And so the general concept behind it is fairly straightforward. However, the way that has to be described needs to be something that actually sounds like an actual event that's happening. So that's where we're up to now, is to figure out what that new wording will look like. So some of the feedback has been provided through the proposed use cases site, the conference page. And there have been some changes that are sort of highlighted here where we've started to put those in. But the feeling that I got during the workshop was that there's a lot more contention around some of the other ways that these use cases were described. So looking for a lot more feedback from everybody, not just saying that, we don't like the color of this thing, that to actually start providing new colors that we can actually use for them. So if you move forward, Danielle. So there are many different ways to supply suggestions around the wording. So these aren't anything new, the same ones that we've had for the last number of weeks. With the inline comments and general comments, we're trying to get through and get those incorporated. There's been a limit to the number of changes, sort of thing, that we don't want to make sweeping changes unless everyone's sort of on board with them. So with the inline comments and with the comments at the bottom of the page, everyone can feel free to jump in and provide replies or responses to them to at least get their opinions heard as far as whether they agree or disagree with a proposal somebody's put in place. And the idea then is that once there's general agreement that yes, this is how we want to change those the wording for it, then yeah, we'll push those through. Saves the whole process of updating the page and then have everyone provide a whole new set of feedback saying, okay, now we don't like that version of what you put in either. So so yeah, that's just the so we'll continue with this process for the moment. If you can go forward, Danielle. But the important point here is that there won't be enough time to have an official vote like we did around nominating the 12 and the P10 that we just put in. There won't be enough time for everybody to vote on every single wording change that comes through. So we need to sort of be patient. We'll put some changes into the wording, and if there's something that anyone is very much against or really wants to change in, then these are the mechanisms that are there to provide that feedback. Forward now, Danielle.
I just note we've also got a hand raised from Angus.
Yes, sorry, Angus.
Maybe I might be jumping ahead. Are we going to, I agree that we can't vote on every word. Are we going to have discussion about a use case? Not today, but are we going to eventually get in this forum, sort of verbal discussion about where we've arrived with the use case, like reading it out and discussing it?
That's a very good question. Yes, yeah, I completely agree. The only challenge that we'll face is the timing of it. Like, there's a lot of other concepts that we need to discuss during these sessions, but the more time that we can spend discussing use cases, the happier that I will be. We will just have to get them fit into the agenda, and specifically targeting the ones that are the most contentious and that need to be sorted out. Hopefully there'll be ones that, or the majority of them, everyone will sort of agree that, yep, that wording's close enough. We're happy to run with that. But there's other aspects of the use cases that will come up as well, apart from the wording. There's several other components to it that need to go into the IG, and those will need to come up for discussion as well. So, but like I said, the earlier that we can start discussing, interactively discussing the wording for these, the happier I will be. So yeah, so the process moving forward at the moment is we're going to have we're currently going through the descriptions. The general plan is to scale them back, replace them with more simplified text. So if you see the examples at the bottom, the one on the left is current P01, which has a full description of everything that's happening. And the one on the right would be a replacement. It's not there at the moment, but this is a suggested replacement for it, which just breaks it down to the core components of clinician creates a request for pathology. The clinician generates a token, patient uses that to send the request onto the provider. So not specifying which test it is, not specifying how it is that the clinician is generating the token or how the patient is gathering it or passing it on, just that these things are happening. And then from there, through the discussion process, through feedback, we can start filling in the rest of the words to make it sound a bit more like the one on the left, but in a way that everybody is happy with. So that's the approach there. I'm happy if anyone completely agrees or disagrees with that. Feel free to call out now. Otherwise, again, we've got the feedback mechanisms where you can start providing that information too.
I think that as a way to get to a very high level view of the use cases, that where we can simplify does make sense. In order to fully describe any of the use cases, we will, like, this isn't the end. If we're going to be addressing the use cases in the implementation guides, we need to work through use cases on how does that work, things like sequence diagrams and that kind of content to really build through into the use case. So I think, so this proposal is to get some agreement and shared understanding around a very high level description of the intent of each of the use cases.
Yes. Yes, that's right. So if everyone agrees that this is what they expected that particular use case to represent, then that's great. We've got agreement on that. And then we start adding in, okay, well, a test that can support that is blah. And if everyone agrees or disagrees and says, oh, actually, that test doesn't really apply here, or if we're going to do that, then we need all these other things to consider, potentially that just gives rise to more use cases. But at least if this core bit of simplified text is something that everybody agrees on, then that gives us a foundation to work from.
Ruben?
That's Ruben.
Thanks. Yeah, look, obviously I'm a sucker for detail. Everyone knows that. My question is the detail being taken out to simplify this going somewhere else? Will there be a set of detailed use cases with things like preconditions and actors and so forth coming up elsewhere where this can go into? Or are we potentially going to lose the detail we need?
I think we have to have that, to be honest. I agree with you, Ruben.
Okay, that's fine.
Yes, and that's what we were trying to achieve with. So just quickly, that's what we were trying to achieve with the first set of use cases, was to provide that extra detail. But then that's just caused a lot of contention within the group around what exactly it is that the use case is trying to achieve. So that's why I thought if we pare it back, then at least there's we can move forward from there and put that detail back in a way that continues to support the core idea for each use case.
What I might do is we'll have to table this, I think, for another meeting and go through about use cases and how are we going to build them out and what do we think is, I guess, the right breakdown from the technical design group's perspective and get agreement on that. But I don't think we can do that today. So let's table that and maybe take an action, Chris, to put that proposal together and bring that to the group on what would be how we elaborate the use cases.
Yes. Yep, we will do that.
Okay. So unless there are any further comments at the moment, we might move on to the next topic. Oh, which I might have, sorry. No, that's right. That's the next topic. So more of the outcomes, and I think Angus or Andy, if there are any insights or comments you wanted to provide from the day, from the sessions that you were leading.
I guess I'll go first. So I did, in the workshop, we did features of our use cases. So we tried to get people to read the use cases that we had on offer and to try and extract from those certain features. We're trying to sort of boil it down to what are the things in there that we need to support. The example we used was, we actually used the Rule 3 INR example, and we noted that there's features in there like repetition of a test. So you know, the use case was something like he ordered 6 INRs to be done in 6 months, from the top of my head. So there was sort of 2 features there, like the repetition, like how many, and period for how long. So we tried to get the group to do an exercise where they were pulling out features from the things. And they wrote them on Post-it notes, and they went up on the board, and then they got pulled down and got a bit crazy trying to collect all those Post-it notes. But I had a few things that popped out that I've got a list that's actually documented on Confluence, but a few that sort of raised my eyebrows was an identifier for each order item. So, you know, there's 3 things being ordered. We need an identifier for each one, something we have in V2. So we hadn't really brought that across. Status update date and time that was suggested. I think it's a fair point. There's certainly in Fire the date and time of a resource is updated, but we don't necessarily have the date and time, the status changed. Collection date and time, I think we need to probably bring that in for pathology. Sequential order, the order that the items were ordered in, like he first ordered full blood count, he then ordered liver function, and really just about maintaining order across printed renditions of the electronic order. You don't really want them in different orders because it's hard for people to align. Name diagnostic provider. So it's one thing to say it's going to this lab, but the Medicare schedule also allows you to say it needs to go to Dr. Bob Jones at this lab. And that's a specific Medicare schedule call out item. Like if you say it must go to that provider by name, then only that provider can claim Medicare, the others can't. So I think we need to consider that. And the last one I had was just urgent date and time. So it's one thing saying it's urgent. The other one, someone brought up, I need this by 10 o'clock tomorrow. So not just urgent, but some sort of period of time. I need it by this time was another thing. Not saying we have to, they must be in. I'm just saying they were the ones that caught my interest on the day. I'll hand over to Andy.
I was next in line after Angus, so that was assuming a set of features. How do they relate to a data model? At that point, we're looking at having the implementation guide being able to represent the foundations of the feature. We went through a range of features and we're looking at whether there was elements in the proposed or the draft data model that were superfluous and not useful, those that potentially required some modification, and additional elements that we thought needed to be added to support the features. We had a range of, I guess, additions that were talked about, some discussion around specimens. We also, I think, teased out a lot of the nuances of some of the data elements that weren't necessarily obvious from the kind of logical data model that we were looking at. And I think they will be manifested in that data model. It also became clear that we weren't all necessarily assuming the same foundation, and in particular, the architecture foundation of the way that the places and the fillers and other roles involved in eRequesting actually interact. So that led to, I think, what's coming up later in the agenda today, which is to just set some of those architectural foundations and assumptions in play so that we understand where the relative work of, for instance, a clinical information system or a practice management system lie, that which the eRequesting functionality, what its responsibility is, and I guess more so the difference between a more directed messaging model for eRequesting versus more of a service-oriented architecture approach where eRequesting as a service exists as an independent entity and allows them for the orchestration of requests and the fulfillment of those requests. And I think also the implications that the FHIR model brings to the table. So we will go through that if we have time in the next little while. Ooh. Here's
Thanks,
something
Andy.
we
It's a
prepared
perfect
earlier.
lead in, yes, into the foundational architecture assumptions. Great segue. Let me know when you want me to move the slides.
Yes. This is, I'm assuming everyone's going to get a copy of these, so this is just what I'm going to go through. Some of these might be contentious, but let's roll on in. So next slide. As I said, the
approach we're taking in this, and we have talked about through a number of sessions, is the separation of the requesting service from a solely supporting a single directed requesting model where the placer sends directly to the filler the request for fulfillment. We have stepped back from that, and it's one of the patterns of FHIR that allows for eRequesting to operate as a service in an ecosystem. That service then interacts with a number of different roles. Some of those roles are the traditional placer and filler from a diagnostics perspective. But there's also opportunities for patients to interact with those requests and information in that requesting service alongside bulk data users who are looking at public data reporting or something like that. And there's also some system role here about supporting the orchestration of eRequesting between the different, the obligations of the other roles. Next. I guess in particular, we haven't solely adopted the more message-oriented approach where it's a directed relationship between the placer and the filler. We have an indirect relationship between the placer and the filler. And this is influenced by the policy settings within Australia, allowing for both assigned and unassigned fulfillment. But also the whole notion that patient choice is a key foundational building block for what we do. So there is, in our world, an intermediary, which is the eRequesting service, allowing for the dynamic matching of the placer need to the filler requirement. And the marriage is really supported by the patient and in their ultimate ability to choose how they wish that assignment to take place. Next. This is not to say that you can't simulate a message, it's just there will always be this intermediate in the middle. We also, during the discussion, there was, I think, some angst amongst some stakeholders in that as we talked about the requesting service and the capabilities of it, they immediately saw all data and workflows immediately manifesting directly in the user experience, either from a PMS, CIS perspective or from a LIS-RIS kind of perspective. It's not necessarily the case. There will be an interpretation that the endpoints make of the data and the workflow that the requesting service defines and allows for. And that means, for instance, where the eRequesting service supports, for instance, notification about the status updates on requests and their fulfillment, that does not necessarily mean that for every request, the user is going to be inundated with a whole range of notifications that they are going to be required to go, yes, click, I accept, I accept, I accept. Definitely not the case. The role of that service is to allow for the end points to actually interpret as they will, how they will represent or interact with the data that that eRequesting service is is supporting. Next. We have also chosen, and I guess this directly lines up with the hypothesis that the government presented a few weeks ago, the notion that we're not building this with the idea that there is only ever one eRequesting service, nor have we said there has to be many. We've allowed for the coexistence of eRequesting services in our thinking, and that means there will be many places, there will potentially be many fillers, and there will potentially be many eRequesting services. Over time, there may be policy settings or other business models that make it more likely that there'll be one, two, or n. But in terms of how we think about it, I think it's powerful to think about this as allowing for a more open marketplace to operate as needed. If we need to have more, we can have more. If we have less, we have less. I would also say that there is often some confusion about the words distributed versus federated. Normally federated refers to the concept that the pieces talk to each other in the federation, and that's not necessarily has to be the case in a distributed service where there may be parallel service offerings, all of which can operate quite independently. And again, we need to think about the manifestation of that within an implementation guide. At the center of this universe is the token, the barcode, about the ability to discover requests and create the marriage, and making sure that is easy, effective within all of those stakeholder roles that previously mentioned. Next. This, at its outset, we are at the end of the day building an implementation guide, and Graham has over the last few months made a number of comments about what he sees is the opportunity that FHIR presents, and that is that there are more transparent and open ways and changed models of healthcare data flows and workflows that FHIR can more naturally support, rather than looking simply to recreate all of the models of the past. And so in particular, FHIR presents certain patterns, and they're the default patterns in FHIR. And I think Angus talked about this a few weeks ago again, about this dovetailing of service requests and the fulfillment tasks that are associated with them. We think that that's a really powerful model in terms of eRequesting, and that is a natural fallout from adopting this FHIR model. So we do need to make sure that as we look at this, we ensure that we are following the natural flow of FHIR and not trying to swim kind of upriver all the time. There are multiple reasons for doing that, but one of the key ones is to make sure that we are internationally aligned and that we are allowing for then organizations implementing this stuff to have a more natural ride through that FHIR universe than trying to make sure everything we do in Australia is extensions and localizations. We only do that as something where we have no alternative. Next. The government pointed out this as well, and I think it's equally a really important concept, is about transparency, and that's transparency from many different perspectives, be it patients, be it fillers or places, that there's greater transparency of workflow and of data flows in the community. It allows us to give opportunities for delivery of greater value. And again, that's certainly a building block we've been thinking about for a while. Next. In Australia, unlike the rest of the world, groups of requests are quite important from a policy perspective, and therefore we do need to think about how that's going to manifest in our implementation guide and in the data models that we support. It will aid us creating more feasible implementable systems. So just putting that on the table, we need to think about groups rather than just the service requests and tasks themselves. Next. This is, I guess everyone's talked about this for a number of years. Where possible, we will create opportunities for codes to be used, but we also have to make sure that those codes are, where it's required, extensible for realistic implementation purposes. But nonetheless, we don't want to default to free text as the building block for our future use. Next. So this leads me to, I guess, this final point, which is really allowing us to move forward with the foundations of an implementation guide. And that is to say, some of this stuff is, I think, kind of not really up for, in some cases, much of a debate. So if you look at the stuff with the solid lines around it, so service requests, which is a representation of task in representation of tests in FHIR, task, which is a representation of fulfillment in FHIR, practitioner roles, practitioners, organizations, patients, encounters, they're all kind of technical building blocks of representing requests and their fulfillment. Notice I've left off either in dashed lines or as the case with supporting information, which is key clinical content. Yes, they have much more nuances about how we should go down that path. But many of these other things are quite operational and technical in nature and supporting the use cases that we've agreed to. So I think it would be in our interest if we can begin fleshing out the scaffold of the implementation guide earlier rather than later, and making sure that where there are uncontentious fire resources, we should latch on to them as a starting point, and then over time be comfortable with the fact that we need to manifest constraints and foundations on their existing attributes and extensions to the existing attributes as and where we see fit as a group. But hopefully through the next few weeks, we can use these as a foundation for especially moving forward with things like connectathons and stuff. That was it, Danielle?
It is. Thanks, Andy. And we don't have time for comments in this particular meeting, and we will, I think, look to come back to this group on these concepts, open that up for comment and start bringing that and working it through the technical design group. But thanks very much, Andy, for laying out what those foundational assumptions we need to bring through the group are. Yeah, I'm going to move us to the next topic, looking at time. I'm going to ask Kylin or Heather to talk about the eRequesting data for interoperability. Or Hope is still on the line, one of them at least. Kylin, if you're speaking, we cannot hear.
She's trying.
Yeah. And what Kylin is going to talk to. Oh, yes, we can hear you. Fantastic.
Okay. Oh, wait, hang on.
There is an echo, but it's better than not hearing you at all, maybe?
Can you hear me now without an echo?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I'm just using Brett, so sorry. So we've kind of pulled together this idea of how the Spark product scopes can intersect. So you can see here the AU CDI, the AU Core, the Fire IG, the eRequesting DI, and the eRequesting Fire IG. I think the main things to talk about here is mainly that we would see that the eRequest DI would be mostly covered by the eRequesting Fire IG. So what as the clinical design group, we really are focusing on the clinical data between the systems, and that's what we would see as the scope of the DIs, and we would leave the system generated concepts and technical items that are required for the Fire IG. So if you just move to the next slide, this would kind of really leave, or what our current expectation is, what the TDG would look at the data necessary for administrative things, billing, technical data items like security and privacy, as well as non-clinical context, things like provenance. So that we want to really leave that in the TDG sort of area of responsibility. We do recognize there's things that there are clinical aspects that we would like to provide input to, but really the responsibility would sit with the TDG. And then the next slide, please. This is sort of like a first cut of the data model that we had taken to the face-to-face meetings the other week, and sort of see how we could kind of, I guess, divide responsibility and where we saw it sitting. This is only a first cut, so happy to take feedback on this, and it probably will evolve as we go. So there's some things that are already done, like the sex and gender things, and down the bottom, the adverse reaction risk and problem diagnosis. We really see the left side of that all really sitting in the IG, so with the TDG. And then there's a number of things on the right that we would kind of look at in terms of the eRequesting DI. So this is sort of a first cut. Happy to take feedback maybe outside of this, because I don't think we have a lot of time, so just feel free to send us an email or turn up at the next CDG, which is in a couple of weeks. But this is sort of what we're going to propose. there's a few things there that we're also proposing that will go into the AUCDI R2 rather than putting it into the requesting DI, and they're down the bottom, like implantable devices and gestational age. Yep. So in terms of development and timeframes, we are looking to have draft 0 by the end of next week. That will be a current working draft, kind of like a continuous DI build thing of it. But just note that that would change significantly over the next few months, and it will be just our current working draft. And then the actual draft for comment will be out in May for public or community comment. Just another thing to note that the AUCDI R1 draft is out for comment, and I know that a bunch of people are looking at it, and I just hope that we would get more feedback from the technical design group, as some elements are likely to be reused for eRequesting. So it'd be really good to have any feedback there, particularly around things like patient details like sex and gender. So that's out now, and it closes March 8. If you are interested in providing feedback and that timeframe is too tight, just please reach out to us at fire@sira.au and we can have a chat about it.
Okay, thanks, Kylie. Looking at the time, we don't have more time. I'm expecting that we will get, as both the clinical design group progresses and the technical design group progresses, that we'll see more of Kylie coming back and reporting, and we'll see more of that content. I just want to move us on to the next set of meetings. So here's what's coming up. We have our next face-to-face in 2 weeks conference call. We'll work on that agenda and post it online. That's going to look at some things like the data model under FHIR, the architecture, and how do we start building out our FHIR content. There is a clinical design group meeting, which can I encourage everyone here who has a stake in the clinical data elements for eRequesting to attend those. And then we have the Connectathon coming up on the 20th to 22nd of March. And then there'll be a Zoom call in a fortnight after that. So looking at time, I just want to bring up the Connectathon. So there's a few events. On March 20th is both a symposium and also some work group meetings. So the FHIR work group and the AU core group are meeting face-to-face. If you want to attend those or either of them, just sign up for one and you can just move between rooms as needed. And for the Connectathon, the link is there, but I will say it's already sold out if you haven't signed up. But what you can do, I've popped the email here, and I might actually send out an email later today to this technical design group. If you've missed out on a session and you want to attend, if you email that and identify which of the sessions you want to attend that you couldn't get a ticket for, you can go on the wait list. And that will just, help as we go through. And when you are, if you reach the top of the wait list, you'll end up getting an email back from HL7 to provide you your ticket. I will also say that it's looking like on that 21st day, the first day of the March Connectathon, that the AU core track and the eRequesting track will be at 2 separate venues. Very close together, 3 minutes walk away, but they will be in 2 separate hotels. So that's just something to factor in. We are in the same venue on the 22nd of March, but I'm trying to get some more details from HL7 Australia about what that is and what our track will involve. So we can talk about that more in our next Zoom call in a fortnight. Any questions about the Connectathon that people want to raise? All right, unless there are any further comments, I might bring this to a close. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending. We'll see the minutes come out from this and also some further advice on how we're going to take forward the architecture and the use cases. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Danielle. Thanks, Andy.
Danielle.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.